On January 23rd, something shifts in the spiritual atmosphere, and this is not a coincidence. This is not just another date on a calendar, and this is not just another video appearing before your eyes. According to the message carried by Archangel Michael, God is trying to speak to you right now, not later, not someday in the future, but in this very moment. And the warning is clear, weighty, and unsettling. If this moment is ignored, heaven will go completely silent. That sentence should stop you in your tracks, because silence from heaven is not peaceful silence. It is not rest. It is not waiting. It is the silence that follows repeated calls that were left unanswered. It is the quiet that comes after doors were knocked on again and again, only to be shut from the inside. January 23rd marks a point of decision, and whether you believe it or not does not change the seriousness of what is being revealed. Archangel Michael is not known for casual messages. He is not sent for small matters or gentle reminders. When Michael appears in scripture and spiritual revelation, it is always at moments of war, defense, judgment, and urgent intervention. That alone should tell you something. This message is not meant to comfort you first. It is meant to awaken you. There are moments when God whispers, moments when He nudges, and moments when He warns. This is not a whisper. This is a warning wrapped in mercy. God is trying to speak to you right now because something in your life is approaching a turning point, and heaven is watching how you respond. The phrase, "If you ignore this, heaven will go completely silent," is not meant to scare you for attention. It reflects a spiritual law that has existed since the beginning. God speaks, humanity responds, and relationship flows through that exchange. When the response stops, the voice eventually withdraws, not because God is cruel, but because God will not force intimacy. Silence is what happens when invitations are continually declined. Silence is what comes after grace has knocked long enough. And what makes January 23rd different is that it is not random timing. It is a moment of convergence, when warnings, confirmations, inner promptings, and external signs all align at once. You may already feel it. A strange heaviness. A sense that something matters more than you can explain. A quiet tension in your spirit, as if you are standing at the edge of a decision you have been postponing. That is not imagination. That is not coincidence. That is the very reason this message has found you. God does not shout without reason, and He does not go silent without warning first. Right now, heaven is still speaking. Right now, the channel is still open. But that openness is not guaranteed indefinitely. The title itself challenges you. Don't believe me? Go on and skip. That line is not arrogance. It is a test. Throughout Scripture, God allows moments where belief is tested not by proof, but by posture. Will you lean in or will you walk away? Will you dismiss what unsettles you, or will you stay long enough to discern why it does? Heaven does not chase disinterest. It responds to hunger. And the unsettling truth is this: many people do not lose God's voice because God stopped speaking. They lose it because they decided they already knew better. January 23rd represents a narrowing moment, a window where clarity is offered before confusion sets in, a moment where direction is given before consequences unfold. Archangel Michael's involvement signals protection, but protection does not mean exemption from joys. It means guidance at a crossroads. You are being warned because you are valued. You are being addressed because your response matters. Silence from heaven is not punishment. It is the result of disengagement. And once silence settles in, people often mistake it for peace, not realizing it is actually distance. This is why this message feels confrontational. It is meant to interrupt patterns, to stop scrolling minds, to break spiritual autopilot. God is trying to speak to you right now because something you have delayed cannot be delayed much longer. A decision, an obedience, a surrender, a step away from something you know is draining you, or a step toward something you have been afraid to embrace. Heaven is not vague when moments are critical. It becomes direct. It becomes uncomfortable. It becomes undeniable. And here is the most important truth of this opening message. The silence has not happened yet. That is why you are hearing this now. That is why this warning is paired with an invitation. God is still speaking. Michael is still standing guard. The door is still open. But timing matters in the spiritual realm more than people realize. Ignored warnings do not disappear. They expire. And when they do, the quiet that follows is far louder than any sound. So as this message begins, understand this clearly. This is not about fear. This is about awareness. This is about recognizing that January 23rd carries weight, and that you are not here by accident. Heaven is not silent yet. But what you do next, whether you lean in or pull away, will shape what comes after. There is a reason this message reached you and not someone else, and it goes far deeper than timing, algorithms, or coincidence. Out of millions of voices, videos, and distractions, this is the one that crossed your path. That alone should cause you to pause. God does not waste words, and He does not misdirect messages. When heaven speaks, it is always intentional, and when a warning carries your attention this strongly, it is because it is personal. This is not a general announcement meant for the masses alone. It is a targeted call meant to meet you exactly where you are right now. You may be wondering why this feels so direct, so confrontational, almost as if it knows you. That is because God speaks to patterns before people recognize them. He addresses cycles before consequences arrive. He sends messages before moments expire. Right now, something in your life has reached a point where neutrality is no longer safe. Remaining undecided is itself a decision, and heaven is trying to interrupt that stillness before it turns into silence. This message is reaching you because you are at a threshold, even if you have not admitted it out loud. Think about how many times you almost skipped this. How many times your finger hovered for a second longer than usual. That hesitation is not accidental. It is the tension between your spirit recognizing importance and your mind resisting disruption. When God speaks, He often disrupts comfort before He delivers clarity. That is why messages like this feel unsettling at first. They are not meant to entertain you. They are meant to realign you. Archangel Michael's presence in this message is significant. He is not sent to people who are spiritually dormant. He is assigned to moments of defense, intervention, and protection when unseen battles are active. The fact that this message carries his warning tells you that something has been pushing against your awareness for some time now. Doubt, delay, distraction, exhaustion. These are not random struggles. They are tactics that thrive when people stop listening closely. Heaven is reaching out now because what you are facing cannot be navigated safely without divine direction. You may have been telling yourself that you still have time, that you will deal with certain things later, that clarity will come when circumstances change. But God is trying to speak to you right now because clarity does not always come after change. Sometimes change comes only after clarity is obeyed. Waiting for everything to make sense before responding is often how people miss the moment entirely. Heaven speaks in windows, not endlessly open doors. This is also why the warning carries such weight. Silence from heaven does not arrive suddenly. It settles gradually when invitations are repeatedly ignored. At first, people stop feeling conviction. Then they stop sensing direction. Then they stop expecting God to speak at all. And eventually, they convince themselves that quiet is normal. But you are being warned before that happens. You are being reached before numbness sets in. That is mercy. And if this message is stirring something inside you, unease, curiosity, resistance, even irritation, that is not a sign to turn away. It is a sign that something is being exposed. Truth often irritates before it heals. Awakening is rarely comfortable at the start. The question is not whether this message is intense. The question is whether you will treat it as background noise or as a signal meant to recalibrate your direction. This is where your response begins to matter in visible ways. Engagement is not about numbers here, it is about alignment. When you choose to interact, to acknowledge, to respond, you are signaling attentiveness. So if this message is speaking to you, take a moment to respond deliberately. Like this video as an act of agreement. Leave a comment, not for me but as a marker that you were present and listening. Share this with someone who may be standing at their own crossroads without realizing it. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel, because messages like this are not one-time interruptions. They are part of an unfolding call. What you do with this message matters because heaven is observing responsiveness, not perfection. God is not asking you to have everything figured out. He is asking you to stay open, to stay listening, to resist the urge to dismiss what challenges you. Archangel Michael's warning is not meant to condemn you. It is meant to position you. Protection works best when people pay attention. Right now, you are still within the window. Heaven is still speaking. The silence has not yet fallen. But windows close quietly, not dramatically. People rarely notice the exact moment opportunity passes. They only recognize it later when direction feels harder to find. This message is reaching you now so that later does not become regret. As we move forward, understand this. You are not being pressured. You are being invited. You are not being threatened. You are being informed. God is trying to speak to you right now because your next steps matter more than you realize. And the fact that you are still listening means the conversation is not over yet. There is a cost to ignoring God's voice, and it is far heavier than most people realize. It does not arrive instantly, and it does not always look dramatic at first. In fact, the most dangerous losses rarely announce themselves loudly. They creep in quietly, disguised as normal life, routine days, and emotional numbness. When heaven goes silent, it is not because God suddenly stopped caring. It is because the human heart slowly stopped responding. And by the time most people notice the silence, they have already adapted to it. Scripture shows this pattern again and again. God speaks. He warns. He sends signs. He stirs the heart. And when those movements are ignored repeatedly, the voice grows faint, not out of anger, but out of respect for free will. God will not compete endlessly with distraction. He will not shout over stubbornness forever. Silence is what happens when sacred invitations are treated as optional background noise. That is why this warning is so serious. Heaven does not go silent first. Humanity goes deaf first. Ignoring God's voice does not mean you stop believing. Many people who experience spiritual silence still pray, still attend church, still use religious language. The difference is that prayer begins to feel one-sided. Direction becomes unclear. Discernment weakens. Decisions that once felt guided now feel confusing. People start relying more on logic, opinions, and external validation because inner clarity has faded. That is the true cost of silence. Not chaos, but drift. And drift is dangerous because it feels gentle. You do not notice how far you have moved until you try to return and realize how distant the voice now feels. Heaven's silence does not always mean absence. It means distance created over time. God speaks relationally, not mechanically. Relationship requires response. When response disappears, intimacy weakens. And intimacy is where clarity lies. Right now, God is trying to prevent that outcome in your life. That is why this message feels urgent. You are being warned before silence sets in, not after. You are being reached while conviction is still alive, while awareness still stirs, while the channel is still open. Many people never receive that warning. They simply wake up one day wondering why they feel disconnected, why spiritual things no longer move them, why decisions feel heavier than they used to. You are being spared that confusion if you respond. Ignoring God's voice does not only affect you, it affects the people connected to your obedience, your family, your future, the assignments you were meant to walk into. Silence delays more than guidance, it delays purpose. Heaven speaks not just to comfort, but to position people where they can be effective. When that positioning is missed, life becomes harder than it was meant to be, not because God is punishing, but because direction was bypassed. This is why the warning includes consequences without threat. If you ignore this, heaven will go completely silent. That statement is not emotional manipulation. It is spiritual reality. Silence is not imposed, it is entered. And the tragedy is that many people mistake silence for independence. They say, "I'll figure it out myself." And for a while, they do. But eventually, they realize that figuring things out without divine input is exhausting, confusing, and lonely. Yet even now, there is mercy in this message. Silence has not arrived. The warning itself proves that God is still speaking, that Archangel Michael is still standing watch, that protection and intervention are still active. You are not being confronted because you are lost. You are being confronted because you are close to a decision that matters, close to a shift that could either open doors or quietly close them. Pay attention to what you feel as you hear this. If there is conviction, that means the channel is alive. If there is resistance, that means something is being challenged. If there is fear, that means the message matters. Indifference would be the real danger, but you are not indifferent, or you would not still be here. This part of the message is meant to awaken reverence, not fear of punishment but awareness of timing. God speaks in seasons. When a season passes, it does not always return in the same form. January 23rd is being marked as a moment where listening matters more than understanding. Obedience often comes before explanation. Response often comes before clarity. And before we move forward, receive this blessing intentionally. Type "I am listening" in the comments if this message resonates with you. Lesson code 418 is now activated. This is not a ritual of superstition. It is a declaration of posture. It signals readiness. It signals openness. It signals that you are choosing to stay responsive while heaven is still speaking. And as this message continues, remember this: what comes next is not information. It is direction. What is about to be revealed carries weight for your next steps, not just your understanding. Hold on. What comes next changes everything. As this warning settles in your spirit, understand this truth. Every time this message reaches a heart, light breaks into a place that was almost silent. I feel led to tell you this. When you give, you are not supporting a channel. You are helping God reach souls standing at the edge of silence. Scripture says God gives seed to the sower, and right now, you are being invited to place seed into fertile ground where voices are being awakened. I hear the Lord saying, what you release in obedience, I will multiply in impact. If this message stirred you, act prophetically. Use super thanks, become a channel member, or give through PayPal using the link in the description or the QR code on screen. This is not a donation. It is a response. I bless every giver now. May clarity increase, may provision open, and may heaven stay loud over your life. Obey the nudge and release the seed now. Before heaven ever goes silent, God follows a pattern that is both merciful and precise. He does not withdraw suddenly, and he does not disappear without warning. Long before silence arrives, there are whispers, nudges, interruptions, and confirmations layered throughout a person's life. This is how God communicates before a door closes. He makes himself known in ways that are easy to ignore but impossible to deny once recognized. Most people expect God to speak with thunder, clarity, and undeniable force. But more often, his voice comes quietly, persistently, and relationally. A thought that returns again and again. A scripture that keeps resurfacing. A conversation that unexpectedly mirrors your private struggle. A restlessness that refuses to go away no matter how much you distract yourself. These are not random experiences. They are divine signals meant to get your attention before stronger measures are needed. God always gives room for response. That room is called mercy. He allows time for reflection, wrestling, and even hesitation. But mercy does not mean infinite delay. There comes a point where repetition itself becomes the message. When God keeps bringing the same issue, the same conviction, or the same direction back into your awareness, it is not because you missed it the first time. It is because He is giving you space to choose obedience without pressure. Silence only follows when that space is consistently misused. This is why people often say, "I don't hear God anymore," without realizing that God already spoke, and they postpone responding. The silence did not come because God changed. It came because the moment of response passed. Heaven speaks before silence because God desires relationship, not distance. He wars because He cares. He interrupts because He protects. And He repeats Himself because what He is saying matters. Before heaven goes quiet, God also sends confirmation. He will align multiple sources so the message cannot be dismissed as coincidence. You may hear the same theme from different people. You may encounter similar warnings across unrelated situations. You may feel conviction intensified rather than relieved. These convergences are deliberate. God confirms His voice so that silence, if it comes, is never unexpected. No one can say they were not warned. Another sign that God is speaking before silence is urgency. Not panic, but wait. A sense that something matters now, not later. Urgency does not always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels like discomfort that refuses to settle. You try to move on, but something keeps pulling you back. That pull is not meant to annoy you. It is meant to anchor you before drift begins. When urgency is ignored, numbness often follows. And numbness is the early stage of silence. God also speaks through delay. This may seem counterintuitive, but sometimes the lack of movement is itself a message. Closed doors, stalled plans, or repeated obstacles can be God's way of slowing you down so you will listen. Before silence, God often disrupts momentum. He pauses progress to invite reflection. If those pauses are treated as inconveniences instead of instructions, silence becomes the next step. Another overlooked way God speaks before silence is through peace being withdrawn. Not chaos, not disaster, but a quiet unrest. Things may still be functioning externally, but internally something feels off. Decisions that once felt easy now feel heavy. Choices that once brought excitement now bring hesitation. This is not weakness. It is discernment trying to surface. God removes peace before he removes his voice so that you will notice the difference. The danger is that many people interpret these signals incorrectly. They assume discomfort means something is wrong with them. They assume restlessness means they need distraction. They assume repetition means coincidence. And slowly, they train themselves to override divine communication. Over time, ignoring these early signals makes it harder to recognize stronger ones. That is when silence begins, not because God stopped speaking, but because the heart stopped recognizing. Right now, God is speaking to you in one or more of these ways. That is why this message resonates. That is why it feels personal. That is why it feels timely. You are not being introduced to a new idea. You are being reminded of something already present in your awareness. This message is not the beginning of God's voice. It is the confirmation of it. Heaven speaks before silence because God's desire is restoration, not distance. Silence is never his first choice. It is the final outcome when relationship is consistently deprioritized. And even then, silence is not abandonment. It is space for reflection, for realization, for return. But that space is far more difficult to navigate than simple obedience would have been. As this part of the message settles, understand this clearly. The fact that you can still sense conviction means the door is still open. The fact that this message feels relevant means the warning is still active. The fact that you are still listening means heaven has not gone quite yet. God is speaking now because he wants to spare you the pain of distance later. What comes next will not just explain this further. It will show you how close you are to a turning point, and why your awareness in this moment matters more than you think. Archangel Michael's assignment over your life is not symbolic. It is strategic. Michael does not appear in moments of comfort or routine spirituality. He is present at crossroads where protection, authority, and decisive action are required. His involvement signals that what you are facing is not merely emotional, circumstantial, or psychological. It is spiritual. And more importantly, it is contested. There are moments when God sends reassurance, and there are moments when he sends reinforcement. This is the latter. Michael is known as the defender, the warrior, the one who stands between destruction and destiny. When his warning comes forward, it means something is attempting to interfere with your alignment before you fully recognize what is at stake. His assignment is not to frighten you, but to guard what is being threatened. And what is being threatened is not your comfort, it is your obedience, your clarity, your next step. There are seasons when your life draws unusual attention in the spiritual realm. Not because you are perfect, but because you are positioned. When purpose begins to approach activation, resistance often increases quietly. Doubt intensifies. Distraction multiplies. Fatigue deepens. You begin questioning things you once knew. These are not random internal struggles. They are pressure points meant to slow response. Michael's presence indicates that you are not imagining the tension. You are standing near a moment that matters. His assignment also reveals something encouraging. Heaven believes you are worth defending. God does not dispatch protection where nothing significant is unfolding. The level of intervention always matches the level of importance. This means your life carries weight beyond what you may currently see. Your obedience affects more than your personal peace. It affects outcomes, people, and paths connected to you. That is why this warning is not gentle. It is precise. Michael stands guard at moments of decision because decisions shape direction. Direction shapes destiny, and destiny attracts opposition. When people delay obedience, they often assume nothing is happening. In reality, something is happening. They are standing still while pressure builds. Michael's role is to alert you before that pressure becomes overwhelming. He does not remove free will. He hides consequence. He does not force movement. He protects opportunity. His assignment also tells you something about timing. Michael does not arrive early, and he does not arrive late. He arrives when delay becomes dangerous. That means the season of contemplation is ended. The season of response is beginning. God has already spoken. Now heaven is watching. This is not about gathering more information. It is about acting on what has already been revealed. You may have been sensing a need to choose, to step away from something, to step toward something, to speak, to stop, to surrender. And yet, hesitation lingers. That hesitation is the battleground. Michael's presence signals that prolonged hesitation will cost more than a wrong step taken in humility. Heaven can correct movement. It cannot direct paralysis. Silence follows stagnation, not struggle. Another reason Michael is assigned at moments like this is because fear often disguises itself as wisdom. People say they are being cautious, but underneath, they are afraid of loss, exposure, or responsibility. Michael confronts fear not by comforting it, but by standing against it. He reminds you that protection is already in place for obedience, not for avoidance. When you move in alignment, you do not move alone. This also means that something you have underestimated is more serious than you realized. Not in a catastrophic sense, but in an eternal one. Small delays can produce long-term consequences. Quiet compromises can reshape entire seasons. Michael does not intervene over trivial matters. His assignment confirms that what you choose now will echo forward. Understand this clearly. Protection does not mean absence of challenge. It means presence of authority. Michael does not remove opposition. He restrains its reach. He does not silence every voice. He ensures you can still hear God's. That is the protection being offered right now. Clarity in the midst of pressure. Direction in the midst of noise. You are not being rushed. You are being shielded. You are not being threatened. You are being informed. Heaven is not angry. It is attentive. Michael stands watch because something valuable is near transition. Doors do not close without reason. Windows do not remain open forever. And protection does not remain indefinitely where response is continually postponed. As this part of the message settles, recognize what it reveals. You are not alone in this moment, and you are not overlooked. Heaven is actively involved. Intervention has already occurred in the form of warning. The assignment is active now, not later. And what you choose next will determine whether protection escorts you forward, or stands waiting as opportunity quietly passes. What comes next will expose the subtle test hidden in your ability to walk away, and why freedom of choice is the very thing being examined right now. There is a test hidden inside the phrase, "Don't believe me." Go on and skip, and it is far more serious than it sounds. At first glance it feels almost provocative, even dismissive. But spiritually, it reveals one of the most consistent ways God examines the heart, through freedom of choice. God never forces attention. He never traps people into obedience. He always leaves room to walk away. And that space to leave is not a flaw in the message, it is the test within it. From the beginning, humanity has always been tested at the point of choice, not at the point of information. Adam had instruction before he had consequences. Israel had warnings before exile. Kings had prophets before collapse. God does not withhold knowledge and then judge ignorance. He reveals truth and observes response. The option to skip is not permission to ignore. It is exposure of posture. It reveals whether a person values comfort over conviction, familiarity over truth, or ease over obedience. This is why some of the most important divine moments are easy to dismiss. God often packages weighty truth in ordinary forms so that only the attentive lean in. Messages that carry destiny rarely announce themselves with spectacle. They come quietly, almost challengingly, asking, "Will you stay or will you leave?" That question has always separated those who merely hear from those who respond. The ability to walk away is what makes obedience meaningful. If you were forced to listen, forced to agree, forced to stay, your response would carry no spiritual weight. God honors free will so deeply that He allows people to ignore Him, even when it hurts them. That is why the invitation to skip is not mockery. It is mercy. It preserves your freedom while revealing the cost of disengagement. Many people assume that ignoring a message simply means nothing happens. But spiritually, ignoring is an action. It communicates disinterest. It signals self-sufficiency. It says, "I do not need direction right now." And heaven responds to that signal, not with anger but with restraint. God does not argue endlessly with disinterest. He respects it. Silence often begins as respect. This test is subtle because it does not feel like a test. There is no dramatic countdown, no visible consequence. Just a moment where staying requires humility and leaving feels easier. That is how spiritual tests usually work. They look insignificant on the surface but carry long-term impact. People rarely remember the exact moment they chose distance. They only remember the season when clarity faded. Skipping is not about disbelief alone. It is often about discomfort. Truth disrupts patterns. It challenges narratives people have built to feel safe. It calls for change when stagnation feels easier. So people skip not because they are certain the message is false, but because they are afraid it might be true. And fear of truth is one of the strongest motivators for avoidance. The test hidden here also reveals patience. Will you sit with something that unsettles you long enough for understanding to form? Or will you rush past it to protect your comfort? God often reveals the next step only after a person demonstrates willingness to stay present. Revelation unfolds to those who linger, not those who skim. This is why Jesus often spoke in parables, not to confuse, but to filter. Those who were hungry leaned in. Those who were curious stayed longer. Those who were resistant walked away with the same words, but without understanding. The message was the same. The response was different. And response determined outcome. Right now, the same principle is at work. The option to skip is not neutral. It is revealing. Heaven is watching not to condemn, but to discern readiness. God does not entrust deeper direction to hearts that treat warning lightly. Silence is not sudden rejection. It is the natural outcome of consistent disengagement. The most sobering part of this test is that it does not feel spiritual at all. It feels like scrolling, like distraction, like postponement, like I'll deal with this later. And later is where many divine moments quietly die. Not through rebellion, but through delay. Not through rejection, but through neglect. Yet the fact that you are still listening means something important. The test is still active. You have not failed it. You are still choosing. Every moment of attention is a response. Every moment of openness keeps the channel alive. Heaven is not looking for perfection. It is looking for willingness. Understand this. God is not offended by questions. He is not threatened by doubt. But He does respond to avoidance. Silence does not follow struggle. It follows indifference. Wrestling keeps relationship alive. Skipping slowly dissolves it. His test is not about proving belief. It is about revealing desire. Do you want truth enough to stay with it? Do you want direction enough to sit with discomfort? Do you want God's voice enough to quiet other noises? As this part ends, recognize the weight of what is being offered. You are not being dared to stay. You are being invited to choose attentiveness over ease. And that choice, quiet, unseen, internal, is far more powerful than it appears. What comes next will show you the signs that heaven is waiting on your response, and how delay itself sends a message you may not realize you are communicating. There are signs that heaven is waiting on your response, and they are often far more subtle than people expect. God rarely announces, "I am waiting." Instead, He allows conditions to form that reveal the pause. These signs are not meant to confuse you. They are meant to awaken you. When heaven waits, life does not stop, but it changes texture. Things feel suspended, unresolved, or heavier than they should. Momentum slows, not because progress is impossible, but because direction has not yet been acknowledged. One of the first signs heaven is waiting is repetition. The same themes keep returning to your awareness. The same inner questions resurface. The same convictions arise in different forms. You may encounter similar messages, scriptures, or conversations without seeking them. This repetition is not coincidence. It is confirmation. God repeats Himself when the message matters more than the moment. He is patient, but He is also precise. Another sign is a growing sense of restlessness that distraction cannot cure. You try to move forward as usual, but something feels unfinished. Even enjoyable things lose their fullness. Achievements feel muted. Success feels incomplete. This is not ingratitude. It is misalignment trying to get your attention. When heaven is waiting, joy becomes conditional on obedience. Not withheld as punishment, but reserved as direction. You may also notice that decisions feel heavier than they used to. Choices that once felt easy now feel uncertain. You hesitate longer. You second-guess more often. This is not because you are losing confidence. It is because discernment is being activated. God often slows decision-making when He wants to redirect it. Heaven waits while you weigh options that were never meant to carry equal value. Another clear sign is interruption. Plans change unexpectedly. Delays appear without obvious cause. Opportunities stall at the last moment. These interruptions are not always obstacles. Sometimes they are invitations to listen. God disrupts momentum when momentum is carrying you past a moment of response. Heaven waits while you notice the pause. Silence from people can also signal waiting from heaven. Conversations that once flowed may quiet. Advice may stop coming. External affirmation may decrease. This creates space for internal clarity. God often reduces outside noise so His voice can be recognized. When heaven is waiting, dependence shifts inward. You may also feel a heightened sensitivity to spiritual things. Messages resonate more deeply. Warnings feel sharper. Truth feels heavier. This sensitivity is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to focus you. God increases awareness before He expects response. Heaven waits while awareness rises. Another overlooked sign is resistance without explanation. You feel pushed back internally when attempting certain paths, even if they look logical. At the same time, other directions quietly draw your attention without force. This contrast is not accidental. God often closes one door gently while illuminating another subtly. Heaven waits while you notice the difference. You might also experience a sense of being between. not where you were but not yet where you are going. This in-between space is uncomfortable because it lacks definition, but it is often the clearest indicator that heaven is waiting on a decision. Transition requires acknowledgement before movement. Here is also a sign that feels personal and difficult to describe: conviction without condemnation. You are aware that something needs to change, but you do not feel judged. You feel invited. That is God's posture when He waits. He does not accuse, He appeals. He does not rush. He remains present. Heaven waits not because God is uncertain, but because He honors timing. Response matters more than speed. A delayed but sincere response is still response, but prolonged avoidance communicates something else. God listens to silence too. He interprets patterns of delay. Waiting does not last forever, not because God loses patience, but because seasons change. Another sign heaven is waiting is that you feel watched, not by people, but by consequence. You sense that what you choose now will matter later. That awareness is not anxiety, it is foresight. God allows you to sense weight so you do not treat moments lightly. Heaven waits while weight settles. You may also feel that prayers are unanswered, not because they are ignored, but because they are paused. God sometimes withholds new direction until previous instruction is addressed. This is not punishment. It is alignment. Heaven does not build on unfinished foundations. If these signs feel familiar, it is because they are present now. Heaven is not silent. It is attentive. Waiting is not absence. It is expectation. God is not distant. He is observant. He watches to see whether awareness becomes action. This is the mercy of waiting. It creates space to respond without pressure. But space is not permanent. Eventually, waiting becomes witnessing. God witnesses choices made or not made. And silence follows not suddenly, but naturally, when waiting is consistently met with delay. The fact that you recognize these signs means the window is still open. Awareness is itself a gift. Many people move past these signals without noticing. You are noticing. That matters. Heaven waits for response, not perfection. What comes next will reveal what happens when you choose to stay attentive, and how heaven responds when listening turns into alignment. Something powerful happens the moment you choose to stay and truly listen. Not just hear words, but listen with intention. Heaven responds immediately to attentiveness. The spiritual atmosphere shifts when awareness turns into alignment. When you stay, you are not merely consuming a message, you are positioning yourself. And positioning changes outcomes. When you choose to listen, confusion begins to loosen its grip. Thoughts that felt tangled start to separate. Priorities that felt overwhelming begin to arrange themselves. This does not always happen dramatically or instantly, but it happens decisively. Listening reopens pathways that distraction quietly closed. It restores sensitivity where numbness was forming. Heaven responds to attention because attention is a form of honor. Staying also restores peace. Not the kind of peace that ignores reality, but the kind that anchors you within it. When you listen, you may not receive every answer immediately, but you regain stability. Anxiety loses authority. Urgency becomes clarity. Fear stops driving decisions. Peace returns not because circumstances changed, but because alignment did. Another result of listening is discernment. You begin to recognize which thoughts are yours, which pressures are external, and which nudges are divine. Discernment sharpens when the heart is quiet enough to notice subtle differences. God does not shout over noise. He waits for space. By staying, you create that space. Listening also restores timing. Many people struggle not because they lack ability, but because they move out of season. When you listen, you begin to sense when to act and when to wait. Impulsiveness fades. Hesitation clarifies. You stop forcing outcomes and start cooperating with timing. That cooperation protects you from unnecessary struggle. Heaven also responds to listening with reassurance, not always through dramatic signs, but through steadiness. You feel less rushed, less pressured to prove, less anxious about being behind. Listening reminds you that you are not abandoned to figure everything out alone. Guidance becomes relational again, not mechanical. Another shift that happens when you stay is that resistance weakens. The internal tension that once pushed you away from truth begins to dissolve. What once felt threatening now feels instructive. Conviction transforms into confidence. The message stops feeling heavy and starts feeling helpful. That is a sign that alignment is taking root. Listening also activates protection. When you are attentive, you notice warnings sooner. You sense redirection earlier. You avoid paths that would have cost you later. Protection does not always look like rescue. Often it looks like prevention. Heaven guards those who listen because listening keeps them within range of guidance. You may also notice a renewed sense of purpose. Not necessarily clarity about the entire future, but clarity about the next step. And that is all God often provides, the next step. Purpose unfolds progressively, not all at once. Listening keeps you connected to that progression. Staying also deepens trust. Not blind trust, but experienced trust. You begin to see patterns of faithfulness. You recognize how previous nudges protected you. You recall moments where obedience spared you regret. That memory strengthens confidence in future direction. Another powerful outcome of listening is humility. You release the pressure to control everything. You accept that guidance is better than certainty. Humility creates openness, and openness keeps the channel clear. Heaven flows most freely where humility makes room. Right now, by staying, you are actively resisting silence. You are choosing engagement over avoidance. You are demonstrating readiness. Heaven notices that. Attentiveness is never ignored in the spiritual realm. God responds to those who lean in. Before we move forward, receive this blessing with intention. Type "I stay and listen" in the comments if this message resonates with you. Blessing code 903 is now activated. As you declare this, understand that you are not performing a ritual. You are aligning posture. You are choosing responsiveness while the channel is open. And here is the retention truth you need to hear. What follows will reveal why your response now influences outcomes you have not yet seen. You will be glad you stayed for what is about to be revealed. As you feel the clarity that comes from staying and listening, hear this invitation clearly. Every time this message reaches someone on the edge of silence, a light is reignited, and that happens because obedient hearts choose to act. I feel led to say this directly. When you give, you are sowing into moments where God's voice breaks through confusion. The Lord says, "Those who release into my work will never lack my direction." If this message has strengthened you, respond now. Use super thanks, become a channel member, or give through PayPal using the link in the description or the QR code on screen. This is not support for a platform. This is partnership with purpose. I bless every giver now. May your listening turn into lasting clarity, and may heaven remain open over your life. Act now and release the seed. This is the moment where response can no longer remain internal. Up to now, awareness has been forming, conviction has been stirring, and clarity has been rising. But heaven does not wait forever for movement to follow understanding. There comes a point where listening must turn into response, or it quietly turns into delay. This part of the message is not about emotion. It is about action. Not rushed action, but deliberate alignment. A call to respond is not the same as pressure. Pressure produces fear. Response produces faith. God is not asking you to perform, prove, or impress. He is asking you to acknowledge what you already know. The warning has been delivered. The patterns have been revealed. The signs have been recognized. Now heaven is watching to see whether awareness becomes obedience. Response does not always mean a dramatic life change in one moment. Often, it begins with small but meaningful acts of alignment. Speaking truth instead of avoiding it. Letting go of what you already know is draining you. Taking one step toward what you have been postponing. Choosing honesty over comfort. These are not minor decisions in the spiritual realm. They signal direction. One of the greatest misunderstandings about obedience is that it requires certainty. It does not. Obedience requires willingness. God does not wait for you to feel completely ready. He waits for you to be responsive. Readiness often follows movement, not the other way around. Heaven responds to motion, even imperfect emotion, when it is rooted in humility. This is also where many people hesitate, because response creates visibility. Once you act, you can no longer pretend you did not hear. Once you respond, you become accountable to what you know. And accountability feels heavy to those who are used to delay. But accountability is also what unlocks direction. God entrusts clarity to those who act on the clarity they already have. Right now, responding may feel uncomfortable because it disrupts familiar patterns. But familiarity is not the same as safety. Many people remain stuck not because they are trapped, but because they are comfortable with what is slowly draining them. Heaven calls people out of comfort zones not to punish them, but to protect them from stagnation. This is also why response often feels urgent without feeling frantic. There is weight without panic, importance without chaos. That balance is how you recognize divine prompting. Urgency that comes from fear pushes you into rash decisions. Urgency that comes from God pulls you into alignment. One exhausts you. The other steadies you. Now is also the moment to anchor your response outwardly. Engagement is not about attention. It is about testimony. When you choose to like this video, you are marking agreement. When you leave a comment, you are acknowledging that you heard and recognized the moment. When you share this message, you become part of the warning reaching someone else who may be closer to silence than they realize. And when you subscribe to this channel, you are choosing to remain connected to messages that keep your awareness sharp and your spirit alert. These actions are not trivial. In the spiritual realm, they are acknowledgments. They say, I am present. I am listening. I am responding. Heaven honors response because response keeps relationship alive. This is also a moment to speak deliberately, even if only quietly, even if only in your heart. Saying yes to God is not about eloquence. It is about sincerity. A simple internal acknowledgement can shift an entire season. God listens closely to honest responses even when they are incomplete. Be careful not to confuse delay with wisdom here. Wisdom seeks understanding, but it does not ignore direction. If you already know what needs to change, what needs to stop, or what needs to begin, waiting for more confirmation may not be discernment. It may be avoidance. Heaven has already confirmed enough for response to begin. And here is the retention truth you need to hear at this point. What you do next influences not just this moment, but what you will be able to hear later. Choices now shape sensitivity later. You will want to hear what comes next, because it reveals the difference between delay and disobedience, and that difference changes everything. Response also protects you from regret. Many people look back not wishing they had known more, but wishing they had acted sooner. God speaks in time so that regret can be avoided, not processed later. This message is giving you that advantage now. Heaven is not demanding perfection. It is inviting participation. God is not asking for your future. He is asking for your attention and your willingness today. Silence does not fall on those who respond imperfectly. It settles on those who stop responding altogether. As this part closes, recognize where you are. You are not at the beginning of the message anymore. You are in the middle of a decision. And what you choose to do with what you have heard will determine how clearly you hear what comes next. The door is still open. The voice is still present. The invitation is still active. Response is the bridge between warning and blessing. There is a critical difference between delay and disobedience, and many people blur the line without realizing the spiritual consequences. Delay often disguises itself as wisdom. It sounds reasonable. It feels careful. It presents itself as patience. But disobedience often hides inside prolonged delay, quietly reshaping direction while a person believes they are simply waiting for the right time. Heaven does not judge intention alone. It responds to patterns, and patterns of delay communicate something very specific. Delay says, "I heard, but not yet." Disobedience says, "I heard, but no." On the surface, those statements seem very different. Spiritually, when delay becomes habitual, the outcome begins to resemble disobedience. Not because God is harsh, but because seasons move forward whether people do or not. What was obedience yesterday can become mistiming tomorrow. Timing is not flexible in the way people often assume. God works in windows, not in endless open spaces. When He speaks, He aligns circumstances, readiness, protection, and opportunity together. That alignment does not remain indefinitely. When delay stretches beyond the season it was meant for, the alignment begins to dissolve. Opportunities shift. Positions. Momentum changes direction. This is when people feel like things suddenly became harder, even though nothing obvious changed. Disobedience is not always dramatic rebellion. More often, it is quiet postponement. It is knowing what needs to be done and choosing comfort instead. It is choosing familiarity over faith. It is saying, "later," so many times that later loses its meaning. Heaven does not respond to verbal agreement. It responds to movement. When movement stalls long enough, heaven adjusts. This is why many people say, "I don't feel God like I used to." It is rarely because God withdrew suddenly. It is because the season of response passed quietly. Delay slowly numbs sensitivity. Conviction softens. Urgency fades. What once felt pressing now feels optional. That is the subtle shift where delay crosses into disobedience, not in attitude, but in effect. God is patient, but patience is not permission to ignore timing. Patience gives room to respond, not endless time to postpone. When people confuse God's patience with approval, they misread silence as agreement. Silence is not agreement. Silence is space, and space is meant to be used, not occupied indefinitely. Another danger of delay is that it trains the heart to resist urgency. When a person repeatedly postpones obedience, future promptings feel less intense. Not because God stopped speaking clearly, but because the heart learned to mute the volume. Over time, what once felt urgent now feels distant. This is how silence forms, not suddenly, but gradually. Disobedience also reshapes priority. When obedience is delayed, Other things begin to fill the space. Distractions feel louder. Secondary concerns feel more important. Spiritual focus weakens, not because of sin, but because of substitution. God is slowly moved from center to background, and background voices are easier to ignore. It is important to understand that God does not measure obedience by outcomes, but by responsiveness. You can obey Him perfectly and still remain aligned, but you cannot delay indefinitely and expect alignment to remain intact. Heaven adjusts to responsiveness, not intention. This is not about condemnation. It is about clarity. There are moments when waiting is obedience. That is true. But waiting always carries instruction. Waiting is active, not passive. It involves listening, preparing, lining, and staying alert. Delay, on the other hand, avoids engagement and postpones responsibility. It numbs urgency. One keeps the channel open. The other slowly closes it. Right now, you are being shown this difference because it matters for what comes next. God is not accusing you. He is clarifying the stakes. The reason this message feels serious is because you are near a boundary, not between good and bad, but between responsiveness and resistance. That boundary determines whether clarity increases or fades. Many people regret disobedience not because of what they did wrong, but because of what they delayed too long. They look back and realize that the warning was there, the nudge was there, the opportunity was there, but comfort won. Familiarity won. The fear won. This message exists so that does not become your story. Heaven is still speaking now because the window has not fully closed. But awareness alone is not the goal. Response is. Delay still has the opportunity to become obedience if it ends. The longer it continues, the more it begins to shape direction on its own. This is not meant to create fear. It is meant to create decisiveness. God values humble movement more than perfect timing. He honors willingness more than certainty. What matters now is not how long you waited, but whether you are willing to move. As this part concludes, understand this clearly. Delay and disobedience may feel different internally, but over time they produce the same result: distance. God is offering clarity now, so distance does not have to follow. What comes next will reveal the hope in this warning, the truth that the door is still open, and why this moment is not about loss, but about return. There is a door that is still open right now, and that truth matters more than any warning you have heard so far. Warnings without hope would only create fear, but this message has never been about fear. It has always been about timing, mercy, and invitation. The very fact that you are hearing this means the door has not closed. Taunts has not settled. Heaven has not withdrawn. God does not warn people after the opportunity is gone. He warns them while it still exists. An open door does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like awareness returning. Sometimes it looks like conviction resurfacing. Sometimes it looks like a pause that gives you one more chance to choose differently. Open doors are often quiet because they respect free will. God does not drag people through them. He stands beside them and waits. Right now, the door that remains open is the door of responsiveness. It is the door that leads back to clarity, direction, and peace. You may feel like you have delayed too long, ignored too much, or drifted farther than you should have. But distance does not close doors, indifference does. As long as your heart can still feel the weight of this message, the door remains open. Many people assume that missed moments are final, that if they did not respond immediately, the opportunity is gone forever. That is not how God works. While seasons do change, mercy always provides a path back when humility is present. The open door before you is not the same door you had before, but it is still a door, and it leads forward, not backward. This door is open because God values restoration more than regret. He does not remind you of what you missed to shame you. He reminds you so you can re-engage. Heaven is not keeping score the way people do. He is watching posture. Are you open now? Are you willing now? That is what matters most in this moment. Archangel Michael's presence in this message is also a sign that protection is still active. Guards do not stand at doors that are already closed. They stand at thresholds, places of transition. Michael stands not to block you, but to defend the passage. That means moving forward is still possible. It means opposition has not won. It means delay has not yet become final. An open door also means choice still exists. God has not removed your agency. He has not decided for you. He is allowing you to decide with clarity rather than confusion. That is mercy. Many people only realize the value of God's voice after it fades. You are being spared that realization by being warned before it happens. This door is also open because God's desire has never been silence. Silence is not his goal. Connection is. Direction is. Relationship is. Silence is simply the consequence when connection is repeatedly declined. But where connection is still desired, silence does not need to follow. Heaven responds quickly when hearts turn. You may feel unqualified to respond now. You may feel behind. You may feel uncertain. But qualification has never been the requirement for obedience. Willingness has. God does not ask you to fix everything before you return. He asks you to return so he can direct what comes next. The open door leads to process, not perfection. There is also something important to understand about timing here. An open door does not stay open because time is abundant. It stays open because mercy is active. But mercy does not linger indefinitely. Not because God is impatient, but because life continues to move. Choices still accumulate. Paths still form. The door is open now because now is still usable. This is why the message has grown progressively clearer. The closer you get to a decision point, the clearer the direction becomes. God does not want ambiguity to be the reason you do not respond. He removes confusion so that choice is honest. What you choose next will be chosen with awareness, not ignorance. If you feel relief hearing that the door is still open, that relief is not accidental. It is the response of hope being reawakened. Hope is often the first thing that disappears when people sense distance from God. The return of hope signals that restoration is possible. Heaven does not restore what it has abandoned. It restores what it still claims. Right now, you stand at a threshold, not between punishment and reward, but between distance and direction. The open door invites you back into conversation, back into guidance, back into alignment. It does not erase the seriousness of the warning. It fulfills its purpose. This moment is not about what you failed to do earlier. It is about what you are willing to do now. Heaven always measures from the present forward. Past delay does not disqualify present obedience, but present avoidance will shape future silence. The door is open because God is still speaking. The channel is still clear. The invitation is still active. What you do with this moment will determine whether the next season carries clarity or quiet. What comes next will bring everything together, not with fear, but with assurance. It will remind you of who God is, why He speaks, and how peace returns when response meets mercy. As this message comes to its final moment, it is essential to slow down and understand the heart behind everything that has been spoken. God's intention was never to frighten you, pressure you, or overwhelm you with urgency. His intention has always been connection. Heaven speaks because it desires relationship, not distance. Every warning you heard carried mercy within it, and every moment of intensity was anchored in love. The goal was never to push you away. It was to draw you closer while there was still time to respond. Silence from heaven is not God's desire for your life. It has never been His plan, and it is never His preference. God is a speaking guide. He guides, corrects, reassures, and leads His people with intention. When heaven grows quiet, it is not because God enjoys withdrawal, but because relationship requires response. Love does not force itself where it is continually ignored. The greatest assurance you can take from this message is this: God is still speaking to you right now. The door is still open. The invitation has not expired. What restores the flow of heaven is humility, not perfection, not certainty, not having every answer figured out. Humility. A heart that says, I am listening, even when understanding feels incomplete. A spirit that remains teachable even when direction feels uncomfortable. God responds quickly to humility because humility keeps the channel open. Pride resists correction. Humility receives guidance. Silence does not linger where humility lies. Peace also returns the same way clarity does, through alignment. When your posture aligns with God's voice, peace follows naturally. Not the fragile peace that depends on circumstances being calm, but the steady peace that comes from knowing you are walking in step with divine direction. That peace is not reserved for the future. It is available now. It is the inheritance of those who choose responsiveness over resistance. This message has carried weight because your life carries weight. God does not issue strong warnings to insignificant moments. He speaks clearly when choices matter. He sends urgency when timing is important. And the fact that this message ends not with condemnation, but with reassurance, reveals God's true heart toward you. He wants you close. He wants you aware. He wants you guided, not guessing. You are not too far gone. You are not disqualified because of delay. You are not beyond restoration because of hesitation. Heaven measures obedience from the moment it begins, not from the moment it should have started. What matters now is that response exists, that listening continues, that your heart remains open. God does not dwell on what you missed. He focuses on what you choose next. If fear tried to rise at any point during this message, release it now. Fear that paralyzes is not from God. Reverence is. Awareness is. Responsibility is. But fear that pauses withdrawal does not come from heaven. God's voice steadied before it directs. He hears before He leads. He does not rush the humble. He strengthens them. As you move forward from this moment, carry this truth with you. Heaven responds to those who remain responsive. Silence does not settle over hearts that listen. Distance does not grow where humility remains alive. God does not abandon attentive hearts. He guides them step by step, season by season. You are leaving this message not with a threat hanging over you, but with an invitation resting before you. An invitation to remain open, to stay aware, to keep listening. God's voice does not disappear suddenly. It fades only when people stop responding. And today, you chose to respond by staying. Now receive this final blessing with intention and faith. Type "Heaven hears me" in the comments if this message resonates with you. Blessing code 6129 is now activated. This declaration is not symbolic. It is directional. It affirms your posture. It seals awareness with intention. It marks your decision to remain responsive while heaven is still speaking. As this message closes, rest in this assurance: God is not finished speaking to you. This was not the end of the conversation. It was a turning point within it. Clarity will come. Peace will deepen. Direction will unfold. Not because you forced it, but because you stayed open. Heaven does not go silent over hearts that choose to listen. As this message settles and assurance fills your spirit, hear this final invitation clearly. Every word released today exists because light is still breaking into places where silence almost took hold. I feel led to speak this plainly. When you give, you are helping God keep His voice alive in hearts that are one moment away from giving up. The Lord is saying, "Those who sow into my voice will never lack my guidance." If this message strengthened you, respond now through Super Thanks, become a channel member, or give through PayPal using the link in the description or the PayPal QR code flashing on screen. This is not generosity alone. It is obedience meeting divine timing. I speak blessing over every giver now. May clarity increase. May peace guard your steps. And may heaven remain open over your life. Obey the prompting and release the seed now.